Greetings, everyone. I'm Sophis, and I'm joined by Bootman today. So, we just want to have a quick talk. Unlike our usual talks, I don't intend on having an extensive look at, the dev diaries because by the time this video is out, it will be a few days since Rise from Ruin has come out. So, I want to talk instead primarily about the barbarian culture. Actually, before I do that, do you want to just introduce yourself, Bootman?
Yeah. Hey there. I'm Bootman. I make videos very rarely, but they're pretty good when I do.
Yeah. And Bootman has been on a tiny Age of Wonders hiatus. He actually skipped a little bit of Thrones of Blood, but he's been excited with everything we've seen from Rise from Ruin and got back into the game. So I'm very happy to have him again so we can talk stuff and discuss builds. It's very good. So yeah, the plan today is to talk about barbarians. And so I think of course, they have barbarians in their sites, the developers, because they made a poll, I think around December, was it? Asking which culture people wanted reworked more. And I believe Reavers won that by a significant margin. But Barbarians was in that poll, so they are definitely aware that out of the original cultures, it's one that is deserving of that attention and a rework. And well, I think the more time goes on and we get new cultures, I think Barbarian is losing its niche more and more. Bootman and I have a disagreement, but one point I'll make is I think, personally at least, I see a little bit of this being a last nail in the coffin with the Nomads because not only do the Nomads, through what they can do with the whole exploiting terrain and making it, less interesting to expand into, the whole you drain the resources and then it costs quite a bit to actually restore things. I think it makes them very good raiders and they're very mobile. I mean, with Nomad Conquerors, you can drop a city right against enemy territory. And even things like, for instance, the Shrine of Calamity, or a Cursed Shrine, something like that, from the Tome of Calamity, it gets a lot more value with this because you can then drop this structure and turn the enemy provinces into ash, and then you just pack up your city and go when you're done. I mean, I think this is a very aggressive and interesting playstyle that I think pushes Barbarian out of a niche even further. But Bootman has a somewhat different take on that, so
I mean, that was to be honest, that was basically my take, more or less. Um, it's just that it's not currently a thing that barbarians do. Barbarians aren't a big raiding culture. They have no real raiding support. You can maybe contrive that they are raiding adjacent because they have the outpost ability, but the outpost ability really is their most unique feature currently. It's that and uh, unfortunately the only other thing you could really give them is critical hits. And so those are the two big things. You're like, oh yeah, that's barbarian culture right now. Um, they also have a pretty unique unit base, but really that's not what we're kind of talking about at the moment here. Yeah, I would just say that if they are going to rework barbarians, it's going to be a bit tougher now because the Oathsworn, the forget which one it was, the red ones. I forget the
Strife,
exact name. What?
Oath of Strife.
Yeah, Strife. There you go. Yeah. So the Strife Oathsworn, um, they are already like the premier raiding culture. Like you can't really do much better than them. And even nomads, nomads aren't gonna beat Strife as a pure we do raiding culture because Strife is so good at it. It's ridiculous. So even that scenario, they're not going to win by pure rating. It's really the idea of the whole you park your city next to them and you do continuous raids over and over again. That's sort of the niche they're taking. But it's tough to say where barbarians could move into if they wanted to make barbarians more raidy. I assume at this point they'll basically have to just do something other than raiding, or maybe there's a niche within raiding that we haven't thought of yet. Maybe we'll figure it out through this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, another thing, which is, I think, the only addition I would make to your point, is barbarians also have mobility because exactly due to the outpost thing, which is their unique sort of niche, they also had more or less the ultimate mobility, which you kind of get with nomads. I mean, of course, you're not going to be zooming around the map with the city barge, and you won't have the power to make outposts like the barbarians, but you have mobility in an entirely different way, and I think it affects that niche a little bit. And I would argue that, sure, they aren't as critical hit focused as barbarians, but I would say that the nomad roster is fairly competitive with what barbarians offer. I mean, it's not one for one, but there's a lot here that I feel kind of is in the same general direction. I mean, one of the big things the barbarians had, for instance, was the Furies, and now you have the Strider. I'm not saying it's the exact same unit, but it is a similar tier 2, fairly decent ranged unit, something you can probably spam, and you can even put a mount on it and have horse archers. I think that sort of thing is somewhat adjacent to what barbarians have. So I
Yeah, I
really,
mean it's a tier 2 horse archer, so there's definitely going to be some comparison there.
yeah. So I do think there's some overlap. I'm not saying this is barbarians but better, but I feel between, as you said, Oath of Strife and the whole nomad thing, they're losing more and more ground as a raiding thing. And I understand, barbarians aren't a raiding culture, but they are sort of associated with aggressive play. And now you
Yes.
have a lot more options for aggressive play. So I'm at least hoping that they find an interesting niche for aggressive play for the barbarians, because right now it's really looking like nomads and oathsworn are getting the fun stuff.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I mean, I'm pretty for me, the unit I think of with the barbarian the most, like obviously Fury was really like super cool, and it still kind of is, to be honest. I'm still quite fond of the Fury. But the unit I think the most about for barbarians is their tier 3 shock. Because it's an unmounted shock unit, and then it has the steadfast ability. But the steadfast thing is really all it's got left because it's kind of lost a lot of the other unique aspects it used to have. Like basically, shock units have had a really strong power scaling, probably more than any other unit type I can think of. I would say later made shock units are pretty much universally better than the early shock units. I don't think that's as true for things like battle mages, supports, archers. Like I'm pretty sure shock units they have suffered the highest from that kind of power creep. I don't know if you would agree with that, but that does leave barbarians a bit in the dust. They kind of do need something else going on. I'm not sure what way I would go with barbarians if it was me. If it was like, all right, you get the chance to redo barbarians. What's the strategy? It's like, well, like you said, aggressive play seems to be the route to go. I think the critical hit savage strike thing was that was not a great choice. um, I kind of missed their old ability. It was not good, but it was interesting direction.
Which ability?
Wasn't it that they got higher damage on their first attack?
I don't recall actually. That must have been quite a few patches ago, actually.
Oh yeah, this is a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't recall, but like you were saying, you were talking about shock units, and I'm just looking at the champion here, and sure, it isn't the barbarian champion, but again, shock unit, and it's versatile, and I do think it reflects, as you said, the power creep that was kind of setting in from DLC, because it's natural that I think in Age of Wonders it's been very clear that the devs have been getting better and better at the system, and I don't think
Yes.
the power creep is necessarily intentional, but it is reflective of the growth of the game and the complexity and the amount of things that have changed since its inception. I mean, we used to have a very crazy affinity system. Everything else was very different. You had to you usually, when you had an idea, you only have one way of executing it. But as you've said to me in a few conversations by now we have multiple ways of making something work, which is good for the game, but it also means, I think, some options end up a little bit in the dust when they are a little older than the more modern stuff. And as for your question of how I would rework Barbarians, I'm actually trying to think of something, and to me, I think it should be a sort of doubling down on actual rating. I mean, in the sense of, because Oathsworn get a lot from rating. They basically get, if I'm remembering correctly, they basically benefit from what we now have in many forms as society traits and such. I'm not actually remembering off the top of my head what their oath gives them, but they is it them or the yellow ones that get bonus from fighting superior forces with inferior numbers?
It's them. They get benefit from fighting when they're outnumbered.
Yeah, then they do have that, and I think, yeah, it's a whole raiding party thing, and they're good at that. But I think barbarians should make better use of their mobility. I think they should be able to kind of steal. Um, I guess it runs a little parallel to Nomad, the idea I have, but I think they should get access to unique outposts. Since that's their thing, I think they should be able to make the outposts better than any other culture, and it should give some sort of benefit to pillaging, raiding, or something. Basically, the barbarians are at the gates. You have a whole tiny outpost. It's not moving your whole city, but you set up camp right up next. You're basically an infestation, really. That's sort of the
Yeah,
idea.
that was my big pitch previously, was that it'd be interesting their outposts could work like infestation spawners to some degree. I don't think there is a way to do that that would work. It'd be very challenging, but I'd be interested I'd be interested to see it happen and an effort into it. But I think you're right. The outposts are a good way. I think basically what we're saying is they should offload, so like the power from the cities should get offloaded into the outposts. Like maybe their cities have like slower growth or something,
Yeah,
and you can't get by using their cities, so you have to use their outposts. And a barbarian playstyle involves just absolutely covering the map in your outposts.
I think, in fact, something you could do. I mean, um, I guess it does run a little parallel to Nomads, but it would be interesting if you had to have those camps, those outposts, and they can grow more than a regular outpost. But
Yeah,
they basically are siphons for your city. So something you do in them or around them, near them, goes and kind of siphons back into your city. So yes, it does have slower growth, resource gain, and all that. But as long as you're doing stuff near your camps, the city is getting little chunks of mana and gold resources, food, etc., etc. So basically, you will be doing as well as your camps are doing in, being aggressive and getting more territory around it and all that. I think that
Yeah.
would be a good way to go about it. So I guess they would end up as not exactly nomads because their cities are fixed, but they would have minor bases that they set up and they have to do stuff around it. I think that's a little more
Yeah.
feasible than, just going. I think if you don't have that, if you don't invest into that unique thing they have, they would either end up as Oathsworns 2 or end up way too much like Nomads. And I think the maybe the answer is something in the middle. I'm not seeing much else for them. I mean, of course, I think we should expect because it has been the trend of every rework to have at least two subcultures. So
Yep.
maybe everything we're saying would be one subculture, and then we have something else entirely for a second one. But it's very hard to imagine what would separate barbarians that way. What along which lines they would be split. Maybe I guess
It'd probably be very similar to how they did feudal or certain other ones, where one of them is the old one. So you'd have the critical hit barbarians and then maybe the more outposty barbarians.
I guess it's possible. Yeah, I mean it would focus them as pretty much warlike on one end, and it's all about their warriors hitting hard and being very strong, and on the other end you go and you have this more raid oriented culture. I suppose that's feasible. Yeah, I mean I'm also looking because now switching to the new tomes, I do feel not only do Nomad and Oathsworn step into that, but you also have the new tomes, I think, offering general stuff for any culture, any combination, a lot of rating stuff. And I do think it definitely definitely interferes with them. I guess one thing they could do is maybe something a little more like Primal, where they set up camps and terraform stuff around it. Kind of like Gloom or the vampiric influence. Although if they did that, I guess it would step a little bit on the toes of having barbarians with a vampire ruler. So maybe not that.
I mean, I don't think they'll do that. I don't think it's necessarily the route they should go. But I think it'd be really funny if they had like a barbarian attrition thing. Like it's just in the area, you're getting a debuff because barbarians are constantly raiding you as you're marching through their territory. That's just funny to me. I don't, and you could combine that with vampire stuff. Like there's no reason you couldn't, but it is a little bit silly, but I kind of like it. So I'm now voting for that because I think it's funny.
I mean, I see the potential in it because I think we've both have been trying a lot to make. I think even maybe since Eldritch Sovereigns dropped, I think we've been trying to see if we can make an attrition build where the terrain is basically a nightmare for anyone to go through.
Yeah, my current one is I got a rock giant that has the umbral territory.
Yeah,
So the territory is filled with hills and then also the umbral stuff.
yeah, basically a nightmare to traverse.
What they really need to do, and I hate to talk this way to developers because I do hold them in high respect. So I don't like be like, hey, you people, so start swearing. You guys start doing these things. What they really need to do is they need to make umbral territory more compatible with other terrain types. Um, or I guess you could leverage that it isn't. There's a few ways to go on that one. But right now it just feels awkward because if you're like, say, if you have like a snow territory, you just get rid of all your snow because of Umbral, and that doesn't feel very intuitive. I don't think for most people.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I don't think there's a lot of overlap. I mean, you could argue that the best that the Gloom territory, the Umbral stuff, gets is vampires benefit from it because they're immune to its influence, and they don't get all the debuffs they get from other terrain. But even that is not much. It's basically benefiting a very specific case. But
There's definitely stuff you can do with Umbral. It's harder to make it work. Like right now, I have a build where I've just taken Tome of Corruption. I've taken Tome of Corruption maybe like twice in all of my builds. It just it I don't think that the Eldritch Sovereign tomes play nicely with I don't think the Eldritch mechanics play nicely with other things as a general rule. Tome of the Tentacle gets by not because it interacts nicely with other tomes, because it is one of the strongest tomes.
yeah, I mean, constricting focus got a lot better, especially now with the Dark Culture rework. You can basically bring whole armies to a standstill.
Yeah, it's pretty sick.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree that that expansion was definitely very niche for what it was, and not in a way that adds to a build. I mean, you making a build with that stuff, you have to make a build considering it won't play well with some things. And yeah, that's
Yeah.
a little unfortunate. But going back to barbarians before we and nomads before we go too far, yeah, I think Nomads really sort of closed the chapter on, barbarians having an aggressive niche that I think now more than ever it has become glaring that they need that new place for them. I mean, even, aesthetically, mechanically, everything else, I think by now they feel very old. They do have their gimmick, and I was considering, I was, before the Rise from Ruin announcement and the Nomad announcement, I was actually going to release a build that was pretty much mixing the ideas from my Storm Giant build, where you go for maximum mobility with flying cavalry, and the Barbarians' capacity to expand and make outposts. Because the whole idea was make your city where you want to and teleport around and basically have a network of an empire. But
Yeah.
with Nomads, I think that has become quite a bit of a wonky idea compared to, the current area you're in isn't so good. Okay, just get up, pop up your city, and set it up somewhere. I think,
I
that,
think it'll work as its own thing, but I do see what you mean.
yeah, because I mean, one consideration that I'm very curious about, because I mean, by the time people are listening to this, I'm sure they can already test it. But if you set up outposts with teleporters, can you teleport your city barge through it? Because if you can, that's very, very interesting for moving around your city.
I don't I watched the dev stream. I don't remember if they addressed that. Based off what we have seen, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. It seems pretty it seems to integrate nicely with the mechanics, and they've put a lot of effort into making sure everything works. That stream was really funny because the audience was just constantly like, "But does this thing work?" And it's like the most obvious, like the most obvious thing that should, of course, work, and just all of them. It's like, yeah, if they
Yeah,
thought of everything else, they thought of that too. They would also have this attitude of like, oh, I can't believe you broke this. It's like they didn't though. We dealt with it. The the only thing that didn't work out was city enchantments. And to be honest, I think for balancing reasons, it's probably fine that city enchantments don't carry over when they
yeah.
when they're like that.
I mean, it's fair enough. You set up somewhere else, just pop it back in. Cast it again. Not the end of the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the whole considerations for. I think people were worried basically that, oh, since Nomads is kind of playing with a core system, is it gonna break everything? I guess people kind of panicked
Yeah.
on that. But yeah, I like how they implemented it. But yeah, my old idea for Barbarians, I think it's a little outclassed by this. I think this is way more intuitive, way more fluid than whatever I was gonna cook up, and I think it shows that Barbarians really could use a rework. I know that there's more. I think Industrias and which other one? It's four. It's Reavers, Barbarians, Industrias, and
I'm waiting for High to get. I'm waiting for High to get there. That's the one that I'm most invested
yeah,
in.
I know. But personally, I think it should go Reaver culture, and I know I'm biased. Then Barbarians, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I'm feeling bad for them at this point. And then we go high, and the Industrious can be for less. I think we can both agree on that because Industrious works fine as it is. I mean, it isn't flashy or anything, but I think out of all the other cultures, it's the one that's aged the best because Materium stuff and high production, I think it works well as a kind of bland baseline for everything else. And their tier 3 unit is very, very strong. So I think they evolved well along the years compared to other cultures.
I mean, yeah, they're getting a lot of. There's a lot to be said for Industrious, but I would say that they are kind of suffering from what was their claim to fame becoming more and more of an established thing. Um, Extra retaliation attacks and even extra defenses are pretty easy to come by nowadays. So uh, it definitely does feel like they're not excelling. What they offer isn't as unique anymore.
No, that's fair. That's fair. But I think out of the four candidates, it's
Oh yeah, I know. I still agree with you.
yeah,
They're last on my list as well, even though I love them.
yeah. I do think they'll do okay if they're left for last. But and I would argue, maybe agree with you that maybe High needs a rework before Barbarians, but I guess since Nomads just showed up Barbarians, they could maybe. I'm thinking more about Barbarians due to how Nomads work, but
Yeah, it's
I
fair.
understand that since Oathsworn came out, it's basically been High Plus.
Yeah, well, so my right now I have, I believe, two barbarian builds in my pantheon, which is by far the least out of anybody. Oh no, I have three. Sorry, I have three. I have critical hit barbarians just because, like, sure, yeah, it's there. They give it to me, so may as well use it. And then I have one that's all about securing ancient wonders, and so I'm leveraging the scouts building outposts, and that way I can get as many ancient wonders within my secure zone as possible. And then I have one based around just abusing the shock unit having steadfast, and so I have things like Tome of the Sanctuary, resurrection stuff, lifesteal, anything that makes them really annoying to put down.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's very good. I mean, it's solid from everything you said, but yeah, I mean, three compared to. I know you're always struggling to keep builds in your pantheon from how many you have by this point.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that yeah, they can use the rework. We've discussed it quite a bit by now, and I want to keep this short. So, moral of the story, too long didn't read. Nomads offer another aggressive alternative similar to how Oathsworn do, and I think it shows more and more just how much barbarians have aged since then. And I mean, the whole attrition that you generate with nomads, either scavengers or the conquerors, I think this it will be used quite aggressively, even if you're playing scavengers. So the whole exploitation will definitely. I mean, even in player versus player, I'm sure people will be quite upset to move into a new area and see it's been picked clean. So yeah, I think barbarians can use a new niche. They can use a rework, but please, devs, do reverse first because I'm biased towards them, and they are very, very niche, even more niche than Eldritch stuff. So look at them, and then you can look at barbarians because you did such a good job that now we kind of need the older culture to catch up to what you've been making. So, want to say any some closing words, Bootman?
No, I think we're good here.
Okay, then yeah, everybody. I wanted a shorter video today, just going over stuff. I think this will end up more or less half an hour, so something a little more digestible than the usual hour Bootman and I go on talking about stuff. So, yeah, that's what I have for you today. Thank you, Bootman, for being here. As for you listening, thanks for making it so far and hoping you're having a good day. Bye now.